I call the meeting to order, and we're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag is back there. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Just couple of reminders to please turn your mic on when you are ready to speak and then turn it off when you're finished. And I would like to go around and let us kind of introduce everyone. I'm Andrea Miner. I'm actually the board chair and just going to start off this meeting, and then we'll elect your new officers. Introduce yourself.
Cotton, and I'm on the school board. I'm Mike Schofield. I'm on the budget committee. I am totally sold on Roseburg School District, to let you know before we start tonight. I have a daughter that is still working with the band, high school band, as their treasurer, and all of her kids have graduated. And the school district has been really, really good for our family, and that's one of the big reasons I'm here to help.
Testimony. I'm Ann Krimitz, and I'm also on the school board, and it's a second term for me. Hall, and I'm just old. And I like being here because I agree with you, Mike. The school district is wonderful, always works through tough times, and we're in tough times now, and I appreciate that.
Okay, now wait a minute. I'm going to add a PS to this. For those of you, because we have a new member here, Mickey used to be on the school board, and she also used to be a teacher in our school district. So there you go.
Thank you.
And a parent.
Oh, and a parent, yeah. They all graduated, really.
God, you got them through.
Yeah, I got them through.
I am Becky Marr. I have 3 kids in the school district. And I'm on the budget committee. And I'm not that interesting. So that'll do.
I'm Jill Weber. I'm currently the director of teaching and learning for Roseburg Schools. This is my 36th year working for the district. I have been a student, a teacher, a parent, an administrator, building administrators, elementary and high school, and I'm working at district office. So I love the school district and have spent almost every year of my life here. So
Danielle Littlefield, Director of Finance and Operations.
Dawn Malinoff, Budget and Accounting Manager. I've been with the district for 14 years now.
I'm new to the budget committee, and I have a 5th grader and a kindergartner in the district. Melrose.
I'm Keith Kubrick, a member of the school board, and proud to say that I have 3 successful graduates from Roseburg High School and the Roseburg school system.
Steve Hammerson, school board director. I have 2 children at Hillcrest and 1 at RHS.
Hi, everyone. Jared Corden. Thank you for being here. I am a parent, 4 kids, 2 of whom have graduated from RHS and are doing super well in life. One who's a junior at RHS, and love the opportunity to be in service of our community and love this community. And thank you everybody for being here.
Michelle Nee, Assistant Superintendent and HR Director for the school district. This is my 8th year in Roseburg. And my husband and I are also business owners in the community.
And we have two people back there. I don't know if we could just hand them a mic and let them introduce themselves. Yeah, you thought you got off, but you didn't.
I'm Chelsea Duncan, the district's communications coordinator.
Deputy Farrington Administrative Assistant.
And now Mia is here. So as soon as she gets seated and she gets comfortable, she's going to tell us a little bit about herself.
Yes, I'm Mia Murphy, and I am the Director of Human Resources out at Umpqua Community College. I have only one child left in the Roseburg School District. She's in 4th grade out at Melrose. And I think that's about it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Before we go any further, I've asked Jared to kind of tell us a little bit about the annual financial report. If you've not read this, it is so good. As a matter of fact, it needs to be required reading for every new board member that comes on. I think it would be great for just, if I could get this in the hands of every citizen in Douglas County or in the Roseburg area, excuse me. This is amazing, but tell us about the accolades.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, one thing I love about the report, I'll talk about the report just briefly, but I hope tonight and as we go through the process, like I have this picture out because this is why we're doing this tonight. Just to focus on kids and our future. I love this picture. Huge props to our comms team and to our business office for helping put this together. School budgets are complicated. Oregon's complicated, lots of legislation. It's a complicated process with how schools are funded and how the legislature works. And the intent of this document was to really not simplify the process, but just make it more clear. And I hope as we spend time in the budget, in that also we have a good understanding in this group around how our finances are put together, what their purpose is, and I think it does provide some clarity. I will say it was just awarded a statewide award on around financial transparency. And so kudos again to our comms team, business office for helping put this together. I think it's a really good community resource. And I hope it's something that as members of the committee that we can also speak to, and people may have questions about like, why haven't you guys just fixed your buildings? Or how does this all work with funding? Or they're really good questions. Oregon as a whole hasn't done a great job of the legislature has done a great job of making it more clear about how things work. And so it's been our attempt to at least try to have it be more clear and understandable for the community.
Thank you very much. At this time, I would entertain a motion for someone to chair this committee. Okay, we have Mr. Schofield, I do want to ask, are you open to doing that? Great. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? I think we're okay with that. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay, motion carries. We have a new chair. Just for the since we're on a roll, I'm just going to go ahead and do the vice chair as well. I would entertain a motion for vice chair.
Move to nominate Tom Nelson.
Okay, we have a nomination. Mr. Nelson, are you open to being vice chair? Okay.
Mike will be here.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, great. All in favor? Oh, we didn't have a second, sorry. I thought you did second. Okay. So we have first and a second. All in favor? Aye, all opposed? Okay, motion carries. So we have our vice chair as well. Thank you very much. So that being said, it's all yours. Take it away.
Budget message, Superintendent Gordon's going to begin.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Schofield. Again, thank you to everybody for being here. Your perspective and wisdom in this is really important as we move through this process as a community. So thank you. Also want to just give a shout out. I talked to the business office about the business office already, but they don't want me to say this. I'm going to say it anyway. There's a lot of work that goes into figuring out how this all works. And we do this earlier than most school districts. We're about a month ahead of the typical curve, which I like. The business office probably not as much likes, but I appreciate the flexibility to get this done in a space where we can move forward with things. There is a budget message. I won't read that today, but at the beginning of the 3-ring binder, there is a budget message I put together. You can read that later if you haven't. But I would just say this: we're in a really unique time. It is a bit of a Charles Dickens moment where it's kind of the best of times and worst of times in a way, where we've got so much to celebrate. There are some really amazing things happening in our community with our kids, our partnerships. We have kids that are learning at high levels. If we think about some of the narratives we hear about schools these days, or kids these days, our schools and our kids are becoming a bit of a statistical anomaly. If we take a look at some testing aspects we're doing, our kids are ranking up with any kid across the entire country and across the world. That's not a narrative we hear very much. We hear about Oregon schools or Oregon kids. I'm super optimistic about our future because of our kids. Lots of great things are happening, lots of great partnerships, our medical pathways. We have lots of reason to celebrate in many areas. We also know we need to get better in a lot of areas. But I think what's important for people to realize is getting better doesn't mean like, we're in an alarm, but we're always looking to improve. We've got to do better for our kids. We got to do better for our community. And I love working in a place that is comfortable with that. And at the same time, there are some economic pressures that we're feeling as an organization. And with that comes a responsibility to make sure that we live within our means and we adjust for things like changes in enrollment. I talked the other day at a board meeting. I'll just mention this real quick. We've got 5 really important factors happening that are putting us in a reduction year this year. And it's really important that all of us understand that. So the number one driver with that is our student enrollment's going down. And it's going down in a lot of places, I think, for a variety of reasons. But, our community we're not seeing an influx of younger families coming. Oregon, by the numbers, has more 65 and overs than 18 and youngers for the first time since census has happened. But we're also seeing, the birth rate in the country and the world kind of go down. So some of those factors can be for a variety of reasons, but we've seen a decrease in enrollment. Every year we have a decrease in enrollment. We try to adjust for our projected enrollment, but this last year was pretty significant, to the tune of about almost $2 million in decrease in enrollment. That's the number one driver by a long shot. But we also have some other things happening which are important to realize, and I'll end on a more positive note. But we have escalation in our PERS costs. PERS isn't something we really can control. There's an actuary that Milliman is the name of the organization that looks at PERS rates. The rates you're kind of a couple years behind, so we're working off the 24 market. And so we're seeing a little bit of escalation in costs in PERS, which diverts money that can be in a classroom to our pension obligations we have. We also have an expiring pension obligation bond. So what that means is our district, I think about 5 years ago, Rod, is that right? About 5 years ago, we sold bonds. What's that? A number of times. Yeah, about 5 years ago, we sold $32.5 million. These can be really good investments. Actually, when Rod and I think Keith were both on the board, 2007, I think, the district sold pension obligation bonds, but the term is coming up, and we have 2 bonds expiring in 2027. just to give you a context, next year, the expiring bonds, the delta in what we'll pay versus what we were paying, $400,000 from April to June next year, and the year after, a $3.4 million shift. So we also have these costs coming. It's the pension obligation bonds that were sold 20 years ago saved the district about $60 million. Great investment, but it's coming due. So that's another factor we have to consider. And then the other two are relatively straightforward. We have less on the federal funding side, and so we need to make some adjustments for that. Most of our federal grants have people in them, and so they have not kept up with the cost of people. And even if they stay stagnant year to year, your people costs increase. We see less money coming in some of the federal funds, so we have a delta there. On the opposite side, on the red side. And then the other piece is just like our home budgets, everything's becoming more expensive. So when you think about those buses driving around, there's diesel costs, food costs to feed our kids, insurance costs. We're just like, in some ways, like a home budget. So we have some increased costs there. So the budget you'll see tonight reflects about a $4.5 million reduction in what we had last year. The majority, though, is more of an adjustment based on enrollment. So we do have to adjust for enrollment. And let me mention one other quick thing. This current year, questions about ending fund balance might come up. Our ending fund balance is an important mechanism to make sure we can think long-term. It's like our savings account in a home. The change in enrollment that happened over the year, we absorbed the changes in enrollment without having to do a reduction in force, without having to do furlough days this year because of that ending fund balance we had. But it was about $2 million that our ending fund balance went down because enrollment went down through the year. We need to adjust this year for enrollment because you can't run an organization. In fact, you can't do this process of a balanced budget otherwise. So kudos to Michelle. She's done a great job, and Jill and others working, Danielle and Chelsea. We've been working together on making sure that we can right size our class size, keep those within our limits with fewer staff. But what we'll see is fewer staff, that adjustment has to get made based on enrollment. That being said, the budget you'll see today reflects a commitment from the board to make sure every kid has the right experience and that we're thinking long-term about the impact of kids in our community. So with that, welcome to the 26-27 budget process, and happy to answer any questions as we move along. Thank you. Yep.
What happened in major school districts, Portland,
yeah,
Salem, Eugene,
yeah,
whatever, that we look for? What problems have happened there?
Yeah, I think a couple come to mind. I mean, this is also really important context because the bless you, the districts you mentioned also have bonds and local option levies. They have more funding than we have, and still we see districts around us in crisis. I'll pick on Eugene for no reason, but I can just mention they're just up the road, right? So it's a larger district than ours, but they had a $30 million budget gap, and then they've discovered another $16.5 million they need to reduce. It's really significant. So I think a few things have happened, and that's actually with like a different funding model because they have, we're putting money that should be in a classroom into fixing old boilers and things, and they're not having to deal with that as much. But they also have a local option levy that gives them more funding. I think two things come to mind. One is that I think, well, and this is the case in a couple situations. We try to think about budget not year to year, but we try to think about budget like we think about budget over the next 10 years, certainly 2 biennia out. When COVID happened, there were needs, undoubtedly, but many districts prioritized their COVID funding and people. And when the funding ran out, I'm not sure that they were able to kind of adjust on that. It's hard to kind of live within a budget. If you spend money in people and grants that go away, that's going to be difficult. We have some districts that just don't have an ending fund balance. There's actually been some budgets have been complicated. There's been an over projection in revenue and an under projection in costs. You need to always have that be the other way. If you're going to mess up your budget or be and I think we've tried to budget pretty prudently. We've also made adjustments every year for enrollment. And if you haven't made adjustments every year for enrollment, then you get out of balance. And so I don't know, I don't work there. But it is interesting to me and worth of note to the district for people on the budget committee that the districts that are talking about furlough days this year or riffing a reduction in force this year, many have significant dollars with bonds and levies. And we're finding a way to do this, still meeting the needs of kids. But it takes a commitment to think about, the budget is what drives every good thing we're doing here. It's kind of it's the horsepower behind every good initiative you have. So we've been able to do that while having really fair contracts and making sure we can keep our employees and focus on professional learning. But we just have yet to think about that from a design standpoint. So we're trying to be good stewards with our taxpayers' money. I often tell our employees, like, in this work, you got to be comfortable to look over the fence at your neighbor and know that you can say, we're using your tax dollars to do the best thing for our community. And I think we've been able to do that without, having any kind of, not that spending's frivolous other places, I don't know that, but we have to think about budget not as a year-to-year process. And I hope in this, it's a good point, Tom, because this is a budget for next year, but should reflect commitments. Our board has a multi-year strategic plan. So when we think about budgets, how do you accomplish that over many years? So turnovers in CFOs have been common, turnovers in superintendents. There's maybe been board turnover in places, but kudos to our board and our business office and others who keep an eye on this, not every year, but like every day that are taking a look at this.
Question? You mentioned the ending fund balance.
Yep.
And I've, been learning more about that and the importance of it. And I'm just wondering if you could touch on that about why it seems like it's a lot, but why it needs to be that. And also what is a healthy number that we should guard, that we keep that as our ending fund balance.
Yeah, some school districts will actually on policy put a like a percentage of dollars that need to be set on contingency funds or have policies around ending fund balance. Our district doesn't have a policy on that, but there's really two things we have to think about. So one is we have a lot of buildings that are getting older, and I'm not willing to lay people off to put a roof on. We're not doing that. Like, we can't afford to do that. So we have to have some money aside for, like, it could be changes in like our economic situation with inflation. It might be things like student enrollment that goes down or capital needs. So like two big drivers here are we've got to make sure there's enough to take care of things that you don't know could come up. If you take a look, there were two Ashland, I think, and one was North Medford, that they had two significant like collapses. There's been some changes with our liability insurance that you have to have like engineers look at your wood trusses or they're not going to get covered. So we have to think about like how to make sure we can provide consistency for our kids and not bankrupt the district on some. So you have to have money set aside for that. But also operationally, like as a good practice, is you really need to have about, at a minimum, my opinion, is about 60 days of operating expenses. There's times where some of the CFOs in this room or former CFOs get this, you don't get your payment from Oregon right away. And we saw this in recessionary times where property tax collections go down. And so on the school district side, there's no IOUs. We can't use a credit card. And so, well, you never want to borrow if you don't have to. So I like the idea of about 60 days of operating expenses and just operationally to be able to make sure that we don't have to think about not sending someone a check. We have a responsibility to our employees also. So for us, we're about $300,000 a day. If you take all expenses, transportation, food, labor costs and all that, turning power on. So for us, 60 days is about $18 million. We've tried to since I've been here, we tried to grow that ending fund balance to a spot where we could, with confidence, kind of instill some confidence by having a bit of a buffer. It's been around 18 to 22 in there. I think that's a good number to be at. It seems like a lot of money. Sometimes we'll say, why couldn't we do this with that? But it's intended to provide us with some operational, to reduce operational anxieties in these bump times where you see things maybe escalating or, and for those who lived through the '08 work around the recession, there were some tricky times for people that didn't have that. I'll mention one other quick thing. About every 5 years, it seems like, I don't know, Daniel, with 5 years or so, Oregon will actually incentivize districts if you have money in your PERS cash set aside account. So that's another way that we think about like offsetting those dollars. So being good fiscal stewards actually comes with 5 years ago or so, it was like $1.8 million, $7 million that we got from ODE because we had some dollars set aside. So both that account and the ending fund balance are important mechanisms. So we can think about longevity and also just think about the fact that we can weather some shifts in things. Again, if we didn't have an ending fund balance this year, if we didn't have one, we would have already done reductions in force this year and probably be talking about furlough days this year. So because we had that ending fund balance, about 20 million, went to about 18 million, we were able to cover some changes. So it's a good example of why we have one. We did experience that this year.
Any other questions, discussion? Yes.
I also want to know, we earn interest on that ending fund
Yes.
balance too. So I mean, if we don't have an ending fund balance that is in excess, then that's just money we're throwing in the garbage.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't know, Danielle, give me the evil eye if you need to on this one, but you could actually take a look. You can't kick me. I'm further away. I like that. You can. Okay, I'm gonna scoot over here and say this. You could actually take a look at like our investment at the college, which is really amazing about our medical pathways. And honestly, we budgeted for it last year, but a case could be made that the $2 million that was put into that really came through interest. And actually, if you just take a look at what we earned in interest, that is accurate. So it's just like anybody else. The more you save, the more you can save. No, of course, we're not going to stick all the money we have there. We have things we need to fund that are priorities, of course. But it also does, to your point, Steve, Director Hammerson, there's a benefit for having some dollars there because we do collect interest on those funds.
More questions?
That's actually a comment. It wasn't, well, time flies, but I can remember Lance Colley was still our business manager at the time. Maybe in his first year or second year, we had $8,000 ending fund balance. $8,000. So when Jared says, we don't want to get in a position where we're having to worry, I've been on the other side where $8,000 is like, we're in trouble. And I think we are very blessed to have Jared. That's one of the things he has worked on, building that up, and you don't want to get to $8,000 left at the end of the year.
Okay, let's proceed to the next item on the agenda, the proposed 2026 and 2027 budget presentation.
Thank you. And we did confirm that Jared was not lying, that it is in interest $2 million that we received last year. Okay, so I'm gonna start with general fund. If you wanna, yes, thank you. This is our district funding that comes from local, state, and supplemental sources. We have our property taxes, our state school fund, our beginning fund balance, our common school fund, our federal forest fees, and our interest on investments. If you look on page 3 of your budget, you can see that in a graph form. That will show you what that looks like. Michelle, can you turn yeah, thank you. And then in your slides there, this gives you some details about the local property taxes, what our permanent rate is, how it supports our daily operations, and that voter approval is required for additional levies. We also have the interest on investments. Our federal forest fees are back this year, and our common school fund. Something to note that our federal forest fees, it had not passed, I don't even think was brought to be passed through legislation. And it was approved for this year. We got some back payment in our current year for the years that they had miscalculated our reimbursement, and then we are expecting a payment next year. And then as Jared talked about our fund balance, and that's just the excess of our prior year's revenue over the expenditures. And you'll see that in the board reports when we give out our board reports, we look at what our expected revenue versus our expected expenditures are. And then this is necessary cash flow before we get our property tax revenue. And in the current year, it is also a buffer in times of declining enrollment. We do budget it to be spent. So you will see it as a revenue in our budget. And then the state school fund, it's on a per student basis. And there are additional weights added to students who are on IEPs or they're English language learners, students that are enrolled in a parenting program. There's also additional weights added to that ADM for poverty and other qualifying situations. So our total ADM and then weighted for those extra things would come in higher than how many students we actually have. And then we would be in a biennium, we would be funded on the higher of the two weighted amounts for our state school fund. It's straight. And then these are just some of the adjustments, how it's adjusted for the funding. And it includes like our teacher experience that we send reporting to ODE of all of our staff, and the higher experienced teachers with longer experience, we get a higher rating, which does impact our ADM payment. And it also includes the general purpose grant and the student home to school transportation reimbursement. And then the property taxes, all of our estimated local revenue is also part of that formula. So they take all of these pieces, and that's how they come up with our state school fund allotment. Yeah. So now we're going to get to the expenditures in our general fund. And these are going over some of the adjustments. If you turn to you look at page 7, 7 is going to show you our recap of all of our expenditures in our general fund. So off to the left there, it's appropriated by the function. So that second set of numbers, and that's how it's being appropriated throughout the general fund. And you'll see adjustments in there. Those adjustments are due to, like Jared had talked about, our declining enrollment, our increases in our employment contractual obligations, our PERS, our increases in operating costs, and our transfers to other funds. On page 11, that same data is shown in two different graphs, and they're shown by object and function. So just a different way to look at the same information. Our contractual obligations increase costs annually. Our COLA increase is 5%. Our steps on our salary schedule, insurance cap increase, an opt-out increase. And we're currently we're classified as currently in negotiations. So this will be 26, 27 will be the third year of the negotiated contract with licensed, admin, and confidential. This year is the year that classified is open for bargaining.
So that we'll have to adjust this budget once that bargaining is completed. We do not know what that's going to be.
We do not know, correct.
So we have to allow for that as well.
We do have a percentage included in this. We have a 3% included in the budget. So anything that
Above that,
I'm sorry.
What if it's higher than
Yeah,
that?
so if it's higher, then we would have to reduce somewhere else to meet whatever's negotiated.
Thank you.
And then our PERS rates increases are due to the investment of underperformance and exceptions. This is the same as we have the 2 side accounts that are expiring next year, one in April, one in July of 27. Excuse me. And it's estimated $400,000 in the 26-27 year and estimated about 3.4 million in the 27-28 year. Now, even though those numbers are big, it is worth noting that those 2 bonds saved us about 60 million over the life of having those. And then with that, our response to that is proposing a 2 million transfer from the general fund to our PERS account to help alleviate some of those expenses coming. Yeah.
So when we transfer that money to the PERS account, is that money that we receive interest on?
Yep. And then this is our transfers. If you turn to page 163, you can see the transfers of funds here. So this is an expenditure in our general fund. Because our transfers were reduced in our current year, we've restored those to their typical amount or increased due to the needs of the district. Our tech fund was restored to 390. Our instructional support fund was increased, and that's to account for prepaid curriculum and anticipated expenditures for next year. Our vehicle replacement was restored. Our PERS bond was increased to 2 million. However, last year we also did a 2 million transfer. We generally do not do those transfers. Our turf replacement fund was restored back to its original, and our maintenance fund is increased by 1 million to begin a set aside for major expenses. We do have a $500,000 transfer to Fund 404 for the remainder of the RHS Advanced Medical Pathways, and that is not included in that 404 fund transfer above.
Daniel, I wonder, do we, just for the group, like
Yeah.
when we talk about transfers?
Yeah.
Is that clear?
It's an expenditure in our general fund and becomes a revenue into the fund that we're transferring it to. So we are transferring 390,000 as an expenditure out of our general fund, a revenue for the tech fund to then use for their purchases.
And some of it's like the Dave Ramsey model a little bit, where you're kind of putting money in an envelope for a future expense.
Yep.
And so the transfers are kind of paying forward. Some are year to year,
Yep.
like field funds, a good example.
Yep.
We're just paying ahead on those.
Yep, we're paying ahead in preparation that in 10 years, or I think it's around 10 years, that turf would need replacement. Tracy has a schedule of that, so our transfers are to make it to where when it's time for replacement, we have the funds that we need to replace it.
On the turf.
Yeah.
We have 2 turf fields.
Yes.
So I'm not sure if we will eventually increase both, to cover both the things. I'm assuming the softball field will last longer than, but I don't know.
And Tracy, we do have a schedule, and right now they're off to where one can be replaced before, and then so that's what we're working on, but we are accounting for like future costs with things rising. So it may be in the future we would need to increase that.
So we didn't transfer money last year, right? This
We did, we just didn't transfer as much last year.
Okay. So how much is in that fund?
Let's
I mean, if it takes a long time.
No, I got it right here. Hold on one second.
I don't think we made a transfer at all to turf last year.
700,000
So there's 700,000
Mhm.
that with this
with this
200,000?
transfer. Yep.
And a new football. Is,
I mean,
well, now who knows?
yeah, I don't know now. It would be probably close to pushing about 1.3 to 1.4 million, probably for we're 59,000 square feet at the high school, soccer football field, and about 49,000 square feet at the softball field. We are seeking, in fact, we're getting ready to finish up a corporate sponsorship with an organization to help offset the field costs long-term and maybe do some things that are needed there at that complex, and that will also help. Yeah.
Yes, they become part of the fund that they have been transferred to. So it's like a special revenue fund in our 200 funds. They're restricted to what is used for those special revenue funds.
A question or a comment, I guess. I would just note that the $1 million increase in 404 fund that's noted here is reflective of our aging facilities and aging infrastructure. There needs to be a lot of cost money there to take care of what we have.
If I can just add, when we are required to classify revenues, taxes, federal forest fees, state school support fund in the general fund. And the purpose of transferring over into special funds is that we have a special reason we're moving this money. And you're right, whoever said it is reserved then for that purpose. And everyone understands that in the budget, but transfers gets a little confusing, but it's just because we have to show all of our major revenues in the general fund first.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're going to, if you want to turn to page 175 or go to the tab that says Special Funds Recap. And these are our special revenue funds. So we have our federal grants, our state grants, SIA, high school success, technology, instructional support, rental properties, vehicle replacement, student body and nutrition services. If you turn to page 177, you can see all of that same information in graph form and what it looks like for our special revenue and how we receive that. I'm going to talk about some federal funds first, and you can find our federal funds on page 179. This is a list of all our federal funding that we're expecting to receive.
Excuse me, is there been any change to that that has come up like in the last month or so to these
like to the amounts that we're
These are-
getting. We just got our preliminaries last week. Yeah, we just got our preliminaries last week from the federal funding. So there were slight decreases, but not as much as we thought we were going to have to decrease. That was very happy. Good news.
So these are relatively accurate.
Yes, these are the most recent preliminary numbers we have. Now they can change, but we this is the best number we have at the moment.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm just going to talk about a few. If you look at all of these pages that follow, they're all kind of clumped together. So I'm just going to talk about a few because they're hard to pull out of all of these numbers. So in our federal grants, we get our Title I, and it supports students who need it most. The funding is for schools with high percentages of low-income students, and these funds aim to close achievement gaps by supporting reading, math, and extra education services. 6 of our elementary schools have been identified as Title I eligible, and the district currently allocates these funds to teachers, instructional assistants, and support specialists. It is.
Does the grant come out of the Federal Department of Education?
Yes.
Okay. Same with the special ed services?
Yes.
Both are being distributed right now, you might know. So we're not actually sure. We think special education may end up in Health and Human Services, Department of Interior. It's actually the Department of Education as a whole is like in now 4 different departments. So where they're going to come out is actually, we're not totally sure. Interior has some, so.
Makes sense.
We're also trying to,
Interior.
yeah,
He's going to grant.
some funding, yeah, so.
So it's still federal funding. We just don't know what department we're going to be receiving those from.
Right. So in a way, it's kind of lost. Yeah.
Are the middle schools and high schools not Title I?
Mm-mm.
They're not? Okay.
No.
And what 6 schools are Title I?
Let Michelle answer that one.
The only ones that are not, Hugh Crest and Melrose are not.
Okay.
So all the other 6 elementaries are.
Okay, and then our next is for IDEA, and this is for special education and related services for students with disabilities. These funds are allocated to special education teachers, instructional assistants, speech therapists, and psychologists. This grant consistently falls short of the actual needs of our district, and the district ends up allocating funds from general fund and SIA to meet those needs. We have a Renew America Schools grant. This has not been awarded. It's also a federal grant, and it has been in a pending status for quite a while. We still have monthly meetings about it, and we're still waiting to find out if we will get this grant. If we do get this grant, it will fund our HVAC energy efficient retrofits at both Eastwood and Joe Lane Middle School. We're looking at around 1.3 million if we get them. We are awaiting patiently, but they have been asking for information to move forward. So we're hopeful. It is.
Is this the same one we were waiting for last year?
It is.
And how do you determine, I remember this question from last year, so I'm sorry,
No.
but how do you determine Eastwood and Jolene?
They were chosen by need, and I was not part of that process, so
Okay,
I
you're
don't know
hiring
for
me.
sure.
Kidding. Okay. Okay.
So
Blame Jared.
yeah, I get that a lot. I'm fine with that. But I will say this, what happened with that is there was some like grant money to do some assessment, and we contracted with an organization to do some assessment. They had all sorts of like renderings they needed, like We got some buildings have lath and plaster. There's no ed specs here, meaning like there's not a commonality between buildings, like a common, there's different eras of buildings, but also we have some that are outside, some that are inside. And so we did apply for and received the initial grant funding, wrote a strong application, were selected, but it was selected based on the assessment done by, it's IMF or who was anyway. That sounds like Mission Impossible. Not
Yeah.
but there was a organization that was on a list of providers that we used, and those two schools were chosen as part of the needs assessment. I think it matched. They wanted buildings that fell into certain categories. Those were the ones that most closely aligned with the funding. So yes, this was the grant from last year. It kind of stalled out, but it's kind of ramped up a little bit again. So we're hopeful that we'll see this move forward.
And it true, however, it's going to cost us more than just a grant,
It is.
Yeah,
Yes,
it
there's
is.
matching funds.
matching fund.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Correct.
it's not really, it's nice to get something, but it's
Yes.
not
Yep.
really a freebie.
Yep.
Yeah.
Correct.
I remember right, Eastwood had like 2 different systems and I remember taking pictures of it during the first one. It was big mess.
Yeah, I mean, just if you've ever seen the Eastwood boiler, you'll know it's going to be complicated. And there's several kind of not outbuildings, but it will be good for us because it's actually when we've talked about a bond before, it's hard to keep up with price escalation, but it's not a standard. We can't really send when we think about how much it's going to cost. There's a lot of like retrofitting. I don't know if people remember, but we have a an air handler by the Votech now that had to be kind of engineered. Umpqua Sheet Metal helped us with that. It was an interesting project. But a lot of our buildings are kind of like that. So this would be great for us to actually have more air quality ability. But it also gives us a chance to kind of spec out what the actual cost is, because you can't really pick up the phone and talk to someone in the HVAC business and say how much would it cost, because it just takes engineering, design. So we're excited for that for a variety of reasons, but that's for one of them, to see like what a cost would actually be.
On page 207 is a list of our state funded grants and our local grants. Our state grants include Horizons, our state summer learning grant, our early literacy grant, CTE pathways, outdoor schools, and tribal attendance promising practices. I'm going to talk about a couple of those. The first one being our CTE pathways. And this grant supports growth in CTE pathways to high wage and in-demand jobs. The funds are allocated to the CTE programs for things such as supplies, computer hardware, computer software, or other requirements of the programs. And that grant is 38,000, and you can see that on page 207. It shows that grant's for the 38,000. We also have our Horizons, which supports foster students. It's a transitional program that serves students in grades 6 through 12 for students who are living under the care of the Department of Human Services in foster group homes. It's located at Rose School. The program partners with DHS and the Juvenile Department to provide the social, emotional, and educational needs with the intent to successfully return the resident district school within 1 year. So we provide the administrator for that program, and then we partner with Douglas ESD, and they provide the teachers, the instructional assistants, and other staffing. They have school over at Rose, and then they're housed. Do you know the?
Yeah, so there's actually 3 programs there. We have the Fowler House, the juvenile, actually work with juvenile youth as well. But then the other one that doesn't get talked about a lot because we don't mention a lot, but we do have like trafficked girls and women, and And so there's kind of 3 programs it serves. I will say this, we're actually the only school district in the state that does receive ODHS funding for a program like ours. We approached them, been now 5 or 6 years, around what we could do to kind of provide a school experience. It used to be these kids never went to a school before. And so this is, I think, year 6 of the program. It's been really successful for kids, and great things have happened for students, and we're getting students that actually feel like they belong. They're getting skills. They're participating in CTE courses. So it's been a good experience for kids, and we're grateful for really grateful for the funding.
Yep.
DHS took a big risk in this. The quick story on this, it's maybe worth sharing again, is the program was going to close. And Douglas County had the 2nd most beds available for residential youth in Oregon, next to St. Mary's. And actually, the first year I got here, we were getting kids were showing up from all over the state and sometimes out of state with all sorts of significant needs and responsibilities. And anyway, so there's some conversations that happened around why are we providing a service, and can there be a better service? Long and the short was this: one question was asked, and the question was, if this closes, how many days before we hit $1 million? And if the program at the time would have closed, 44 days, and it would cost the state $1 million, because you need 2 adults for every kid, 24 hours a day in a hotel, no one wins. So we went to the state and said, what if you give us $1 million? We'll start a school for these kids. And it's actually was a kind of a risk on their end. And it's really every year gets highlighted with ODHS, so the Oregon Department of Human Services, around the outcomes for students. We think it's replicable other places, but we're grateful to be the recipients of what range from about $1 million to upwards of 1.2 or 3 a year that we were able to receive. It's a pretty significant win. It's this completely 100% state funded. So,
and we are actually the only ones that they pay for education for. So normally they don't pay for the education, but we are the only school in the state that they do pay for their education.
This might be totally off the wall question, but I was just wondering about the closing with the Phoenix school. Where were those kids absorbed?
yeah, so I mean, Dom's here, but we a large majority of the students are with us in our schools. 58 students matriculated RHS, and we've 58. And so we've worked with Phoenix had more students than that, 12, but not all students were in our resident area. And so we've not every student was captured at RHS, but the majority of students ended up at the high school. Sure. I mean, it's been a range of students being successful. I mean, we had a number of students that it's a shift for them, but and some students that a little complicated because of the amount of credits they had earned. And so when you move into, we see this sometimes. It's not just Phoenix, but when you have a 11th grade student that has 4 or 5 credits, it's complicated, right? It's like we got to figure out how to move. But overall, the kids have done well, and we're on track of just keeping kids in class and moving forward with credits. And we hear from the kids the CT programs have been a good boost, but it's a little different system for them in terms of size, and we've had to work on making sure they feel connected. And so, but overall, it's gone relatively well.
The school at Rose, is it K through 12?
It is no, it's not K through 12. We've had the majority have been in the secondary level on the high school side, but it is 6-12. We see mostly in that early adolescent stage but it's 6-12. I would say the average has been around that freshman type age. So in this range we've had up to 24 kids, all the way down to 8 students, but it depends on we're not the ones to choose who comes. It's kind of the quote unquote the system that gets kids with us. So we're happy to serve who's there. And funding has shifted a little bit depending on how many kids we have, but we're oftentimes funded for a higher amount, but sometimes that doesn't come. The difference is we don't have ODHS. I'm not giving them a interest in doing this, but they haven't really adjusted their budget based on enrollment, but we just stand ready to serve is how that works. Currently, we're at kind of on the lower numbers of students at this point. We're at 12 students right now. But it seems to, depending on the need of students, is how they come to us. So the idea is we stand ready to serve with X amount of spots and welcome the kids when they get there. And it tends to be in this program, we tend to see a little bit of a gap between students as they come in. It's a little more typical than because the kids kind of transition in a little bit. And so they're a little more cautious about here are 6 new kids today. So the enrollment tends to ebb and flow. We can have students transition out faster than we see them transition in typically, kind of by design.
Are those part of our regular enrollment numbers and ADM?
With this,
Do we get ADM?
no, with this program, like it's a significant investment from the state, so we don't claim them for ADM. It's actually kind of nice not to mix the two, to be honest with you, with just a state grant that comes in and we serve the students. There could be weighted funding. We wanted to avoid that because we wanted to avoid the perception of you already get paid for the students. And so for us, the grant was just cleaner to just say, here's the supports kids need to be successful. Here's the return on that investment, how that'll work in terms of like their readiness. We've got kids that have never been in school that are finding like graduation pathways and career pathways. We didn't by design want to have it be ADM related because depending on who the director is, they might say, we already pay you for this. And quite frankly, the state superintendent at the time, Colt Gill, came in a meeting with me and said, they're your responsibility. You get funding for them, serve them. But our kids were coming with pretty significant needs around the state. So this model kind of helps us bring clarity to the Department of Human Services and the district of like, this is grant funded 100%. So we didn't mix the two, which is probably the reason it's continued to be successful on the budget side.
Another one of our state grants is our early literacy grant. And this grant is focused on improving reading for students kindergarten through 3rd grade. And the district currently allocates these funds to support science of reading aligned curriculum, high dosage tutoring, and teacher professional development. Yes, these are our flow through dollars from a part of our local service plan. We get those flow through dollars at the end. We allocate those flow through dollars into these different funds for staff development, transitions, and communications.
She moves.
Yes. Correct. And yes. Yes. Opportunity. Yeah, I think opportunity and people seeking grants. I've only been here for a few years, but I think that Jill and Michelle and Jared can speak to like if there's something out there that we can get, we go for it.
Yeah. We don't have a grant writer.
No.
You're looking at the grant writers right here.
No.
And we haven't invested in one. This is we don't fund a grant writer, but we've had these discussions before, like, a lot of the money we have is grant funding, and it is actually, but we've been relatively successful. We think our students are the best investment in the state, and we actually feel pretty strongly that we're turning around a really good investment for the state with the grants. And I think we're getting some of these grants because of that. One thing just to mention though, and I'm not going to be negative toward any other department, but we find ourselves in a bit of an interesting spot though, because as we see improvement increases, which we've seen, we are finding in the current architecture of how this is working with the Department of Education that we are maybe not getting grants because our achievement's improving. And I'll just say, personally, as a superintendent, how absolutely and completely and utterly frustrating that is. It doesn't make much sense. We don't want a race to the bottom situation with grants. But yeah, we do have more grants than we have had in the past. We're grateful for those, and we think we're a good investment. We think our kids are the right people to make use of these.
Is our SIJ grant information. And this grant is to meet students' mental or behavioral health needs and increase academic achievement system. If you turn to page 225, you can see that the funding is significant. It is. It's a great investment. We also fund for grad coaches and counselors. So that's all I'm going to report on for our special revenue funds. But if you turn to the 400 through 405 tab, we'll start on our seismic grants. So this fund is dedicated to the seismic grants that we apply for. We currently do not have an active seismic grant, but we have applied for 2 different grants, one for VOTEC West and one for Sunny Slope. We're hoping to hear if we get one soon. But this is the fund that you would see all of those expenditures go to. And the grant is for 2.5 million if we receive it.
What schools are still left on that needing seismic upgrades?
Oh, all of them.
Yeah,
Actually,
because they're done in like
Oh,
pieces.
they're in
So,
pieces,
you
yeah.
know, like a whole school isn't done. They're done like
Gotcha.
a gym or,
Yeah.
you know, so,
Yeah.
I don't know off
Yeah.
the top of my head, but I don't think any are complete.
We do have a list we can pull up for you of which ones have received them, but just remember, it's for a portion.
Yeah.
So, pretty important to realize we've been pretty good over the last 10 years or so or longer on seismic funding. We're lucky, actually. We anticipate we'll receive at least 1 this year. We'd like to receive 2. But even when we receive 1, it's just for 1 space in a building. And this is, there are things that keep us up at night. This is one for me that keeps me up at night because the buildings just weren't built in an era where this was even part of the conversation around that. So we've been.
We'll only have a gym here and a lunchroom there, and
It's actually accurate. You know, I think and these are where the community will. This is where Red Cross will go, because across our area, the county in general, most things wouldn't. There's hardly any public spaces that would have that. You'd have the public safety office downtown, and you'd have all the things that we have seismically retrofitted as a community. That's where Red Cross will go.
flooding, not just the shaking.
Yeah. So
Page 329 will take you to our 404 fund, which this is maintenance funding. And this is for our major maintenance projects and to save for major maintenance projects. And this is part of those transfers you saw in general fund that come out and go into our 404 funds. Some common expenditures that we have come out of this is roofing, flooring, water heaters, major repairs to HVAC, boilers, property damage, contracted services for engineering, electrical. Some things that we've completed in the past are vestibules, paving, fencing, parking lot, asbestos abatement, camera systems, bathrooms, and softball field. Those are just a few. And not all of the money, the funds in this fund are allocated for projects because they are set aside for emergencies. We have something, something that needs to be repaired that we didn't plan for. We have those funds to take care of it.
Can I just mention just one thing? There tends to be, and it's really worth mentioning here. We put some money into buildings over the last 5 years, about $30 million. We're lucky to have some COVID funds that we actually used a significant amount to do some capital project, which is important. But we do try to balance every year doing things that are maintenance related, but still keeping as much money as we can in the classroom. It's a balance. I don't know every year if we get this right. I mean, it's common that we'll spend $2.5 million instead of $1.5 million, depending on what the projects are. But I do think it's important to realize, like on this, we have kind of a standard of $1.5 million to start. But as things become more expensive and as things age out, I mean, the board's been great in terms of like touring buildings, but I mean, we it's hard to keep up. This fund is not intended to take care of like significant things. We're doing our best, but I would just say like this is a constant rumble that we try to figure like what's the right size for these investments. I know the board's been highly involved in these. It's a wrestle for us. Like where do we make these investments? There's not enough in our state school fund, or by design there isn't enough to take care of capital projects, but this is an area we always try to get right every year and wonder if we could have done better. Like is it best to take more money out of another fund and put into here? Maybe. So it's something this is there's a lot of clarity in the budget around some things. This is one just personally as a superintendent I struggle with a little bit. Like what's the right size for this budget? Do you underfund another investment you have to do more here? But in terms of our needs, you would have to basically, to take care of the things we're talking about correctly, you'd have to close school for 2 or 3 years, not have any school, which you wouldn't get any money for because you wouldn't run school, but our needs are pretty significant. So this is an area where it's probably the worst money we spend. If you ask me where we get a good return on the investment, it's not in this most of the time. You're just fixing stuff. You have to do it, but I would just say like from an ROI perspective, we all struggle with this. We know we have to do it. We do it because we have to do it, but we're oftentimes patching things that have to be fixed. So just every year when someone says, where's the best investment and the worst investment? It's this fund. It's the best thing we spend money on because we have to, but it's also maybe the worst thing we spend money on.
And then at the all funds revenue and expenditure tab, that last tab in your binder, you'll get a recap of all of the funds. And you'll have a graph right after that that'll split it out in a graph showing you what that looks like. Our focus remains on students and stability. Protect student experience, align staffing with enrollment, plan for long-term sustainability, and continue strategic investments.
Is there any discussion on the state level about how to fund schools differently than we have been? the idea of equity between districts. You know, I've been to Sherwood High School and their elementary schools. And I noticed that they're on the top of the list as far as taxes being paid. But the difference is, it's absolutely unbelievable. And we love the student center at the high school, or the arts building. Think it's great. It's nothing compared to what they have. And that's, for me, that doesn't seem fair. Because what it's doing is it's the poverty that's already here is simply compounded.
Yep.
Because we're not getting help. And I'm not talking about a handout, I'm talking about help.
Yep.
And this is the same problem they have all over the country in various pockets. Somebody somewhere has to figure it out. It's not going to be the federal government for a while, but the state government, you know, maybe we need I'm just teasing.
No, many of us have had discussions with key government officials on both sides of the aisle, the governor's office, about different models. Different models do exist. I mean, Idaho had they found a way to put $2 billion a year into infrastructure funding in schools. Georgia, there's other models that work really well. You know, even when we think about the last three bonds that we qualified for $5.8 million in matching funds that the state said you qualify for, but we couldn't get. We couldn't even go to them and say, I'll give you 5.5 if you give me 5.5. The system is actually tilted toward a kind of against communities that do have high levels of poverty, or that don't have, you know, successful bond rates or whatever. So we continue to, we wouldn't have to reinvent this, but it doesn't seem to be a conversation that ever really takes root. And like it shouldn't. And so, yes, we continue to talk about models that could work. There are models in our own around us that do work. But our state, that's not something they've approached with any clarity or really any resolve.
Okay.
What?
If I remember correctly from the facilities meetings, Sherwood has 3 bonds right now. Is that right?
It's
So it's very community supported.
I mean, I actually lived there for 15 years, so I know the community really well. What happens in the bond side of things is that what you tend to see is that when there's a bond that happens and people see the benefit of that, two things happen. But what you can do is oftentimes they'll go for a renewal bond, and it doesn't need to be any more money. Maybe it's 10 cents or it's 25 cents. Beaverton passed a bond. I think it was 22, but it was like a 10-cent renewal. And I think it raised like $720 million renewal bond. But we see some of the communities have increased growth. And so you see a tax base that grows as well. So to Maggie's point, if you've got students that like are on sports or travel around, you'll see like a huge disparity in the experience kids have. I mean, you can look at things like CTE programs or STEM labs. And for some, it's like going to Stanford, where you look at like, you know, electron microscopes, a lot of infrastructure. Add on that, you can also fund local option levies, which pay for staffing. So kids are having a pretty different experience across the state on the capital side and kind of just on the experience side. So it's something we have to continue to wrestle. Our current model is reliant on the community to say yes to certain things. But what's difficult with that is even when the state says, here's funding, what they did increase what's called awesome grant funding, matching funding. We now qualify for 8.1 million if you pass a bond. And so it's still the systems, even though they're like, we're trying to help, certain communities haven't been able to access the funding to do that. So wish I had a better answer for you.
property tax value. That's probably. We don't have property tax. We don't have the income level or the industry that we have, the job.
Yeah, I mean, I actually have a document up that we got from our bond consultant just to give you an idea of this. But if you look at Sherwood, pick on Sherwood for a minute. What's interesting is their assessed value, their net of urban renewal dollars is actually lower than Roseburg's. So it could happen here. They're about 4.9 billion. Roseburg's is about 5.5 billion. So there's I mean, Lake Oswego's double that. You know, we have about the same amount of students as they do. But when you take a look at like what's possible, our bond rate, I mean, we don't have a bond rate, we don't have a local option rate, but our permanent rate is one of the lowest in the state, actually. So, but this system hasn't been since Measure 5 in 1990, it hasn't changed in terms of its design. And that's really something we need to think about as a state. We're behind. It's been a number of years since that.
You know, there's not the new business coming in. The property rates or values aren't as high as they are other places, but it's all a continuing circle. And a lot of it has to do with attitude about education. Is it important enough that you want your kid to do better than you? Or you want your kid to just do as well as you do? And that's the difference. Money brings and opportunity brings. And as much as we try to provide kids with opportunity, the state's not meeting its obligation. Simple as that. Neither is the federal government. They've been defunding schools for decades. And it can't throw money at a problem and always solve the problem, but it sure does help. And this meeting right here is a pretty good indication of that. If we had more money here, we could do this. If we had more money here, we could do this. And where does that money come from? It's not going to come from poor people that don't want to bond for anything. And I don't know how you change that. But it would be nice if it started with politicians that have the ability to change how the money's distributed and how the money is gathered.
That step brought up the most valuable higher than just in this area.
That's in Oregon in general. We're probably higher than that.
Yeah.
And yeah. And then you can take a look at like Douglas County is a good example, like death rate exceeding birth rate. That's also a common, like, so you think about that, right? And so again, we think we see our kids doing amazing things when they leave us. And some of our work is to say, hey, do amazing things here. Stay in Oregon and raise your family here. Come to Roseburg, raise your family here. I think that's a strategy that the community is interested in, we're interested in well. But yeah, Oregon as a whole, so you think about that, even the metro area, more 65 and overs and 18 youngers, it's more so in our area. And that sometimes can make, like you said, the demographics can have an impact potentially on that. So we're working on.
Too, I just happen to know this stat. Roseburg has less than 19% of its population ages 20 to 34. So we have like no young families whatsoever. So, I mean, there needs to be some sort of motivation to get, because I've heard this so much in the last couple months that people love Roseburg, love Douglas County, but there's no opportunity, there's no job, there's nothing keeping them here. And we have to do a better job as a community to retain those people. Otherwise, we can't even grow responsibly. So,
and as much as we don't like to for all of us that hate politics, unfortunately, politics is where it happens. And because of the times that we're in right now, it's really hard to talk about it. And yet that's where it comes from.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah, so everybody here's an ambassador for schools, and it would be nice. Of course, I don't know if people listen to old people or not, but yeah, we do a lot of great things at the school, but we could do a lot more great things if we had the resources and the mindset.
I like your talk, Mickey. And the word ambassadors is very important. And if each of us went out in our communities, our neighborhoods, 6, 8, 10 families, and explain to them what we're trying to do, it would make a difference. And I think too many of us are looking inward rather than outward into our communities. I just want to say, first, is there any more questions about the budget? I just want to say,
I don't have a question, but I do want to comment about the things that we are trying to proactively do about getting the message out. We have a number of things that we're doing, and one of the things in Chelsea's really been key in this is to put out our own newspaper that's going to go to every business, every person in our district. So it's going to be touting how awesome our students are and all of that. We've got a radio show that's been revived. I mean, we're getting the word out as best we can, but of course it takes all of us. But we're trying to think outside the box and get that message out, because oftentimes when I do have that conversation with someone, people are always like, "Oh, I didn't know that." And it's like, "Oh, the Oregon schools," is like not the Roseburg schools. We're testing higher than most kids in the nation. So, and they just don't know. So we're trying to get that word out, and you guys can get that word out too. Okay, that's my TED Talk.
any other comments?
Good job, man.
Yeah, we want to thank you, Danielle. And one of the things that I realized tonight, you talked a little bit about contract negotiations coming up. And I've watched negotiations throughout my career with schools, and it's really a hard job because these are people we love, we work with them, and yet we're in a position where we're really going to be pinched. As I looked at your budget, Danielle, one of the best things I saw was you've got all your maintenance over here in a fund. Why is that important? Because we want our children comfortable too in those classrooms. We want them safe, we want them healthy, but we also want our teachers paid appropriately. But the nice thing about having it in a fund over here, you can measure it. A lot of schools will put it in with the general fund so it's scattered throughout all of the different grade levels. And maintenance, if we're short and we need money for teachers, we pull it out of maintenance. And I've seen that. And you know what happens to the buildings? They have short lives. We've had the privilege of working with the facilities committee, and we are in pretty bad shape in our district too. So we're coming to the point where we're going to have to be very serious about what we're going to do for our kids. But thank you for being here tonight. Appreciate your questions. Please don't be bashful, because your questions are probably the same as somebody else sitting right next to you. And so again, thank you, Danielle and your staff, all your helpers, and thank all of you for coming. One of the things we want to mention before we close tonight is our next budget committee schedule is 6 p.m. April 29th. And we are simply going to recess tonight. Let me help you understand that is it will continue on. We will have no motion tonight. It's been historic with this district, and it's another practice that works very nicely because we can think about the questions and the discussion tonight, and we might build on those for our next meeting. And it's so important that we be knowledgeable about our budget so that we can then talk with our neighbors with confidence and with understanding of the need. Any other items of business tonight, Tom?
During this time now and then, and help maybe other people have multiple questions.
Yeah, that would also be helpful. That way I can prepare it and bring it back to our next meeting. You can just reply to the email I sent with the digital budget, and it has all of us on there.
Oh, good.
Yep.
Thank you. Just right. Yes. The purpose, the end result we want is to approve the proposed budget. And we will get there. I've worked for this group last year, and you guys are great to work with. What's most important is our understanding of what's going on financially in the district. Because if we're talking to neighbors or we're the ambassadors that we should be, there's going to be a lot of people that have questions. And it's always, oh, my taxes. And it's one of the biggest things you can talk about is the lowest tax rate of any school except for Three Rivers in the state of Oregon. So we need to respond with that kind of discussion so they understand what we understand. It's being a good ambassador and protecting the kids, making sure they get a good education. And as you said, the scores are high, their performance rates are excellent, and people don't know it. They will with the newspaper. That's a great move, the radio show, whatever we can do. But one of the most powerful is you and I talking to our neighbors, especially when it's if we put a ballot up for additional funding. Yes.
So if we have like line item questions on expenditures, would we ask those, to the thread in the meantime, in the interim, or do we bring those questions to the next meeting?
I would propose that we do it either way or both. Okay. If you would bring those questions to our next meeting, Daniela, we can.
If you want to email your questions to me, I can compile them. I can do the research, bring them back and present them at our next meeting. So everyone hears the question, everyone hears the answer.
Excellent.
If you answer some of those during that time period, oftentimes an answer to a question brings about another question.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Absolutely. Yep. Yep. For sure. Mm-hmm.
All right. Any other questions? If not, I'm open to entertain a resolution to recess until our next meeting. It's been moved and second that we recess until next meeting. All in favor, say aye. Thank you very much.